Hello and welcome to Tonight at 8 from the RSGB. Contesting is a form of radio sport and is very popular amongst many radio amateurs. But comprehensive logging software is now an essential tool to ensure that contacts are checked and uploaded electronically to get your results to the contest organisers. There are several contest logging software programs available, and tonight Peter Burton, G3ZPB, is going to take us through the MINOS package. Welcome to Tonight at 8, Peter. Can you give us a quick preview of what you'll be talking about this evening?
Yes, good evening, David, and good evening, everybody watching. What I'm going to talk about tonight basically is split into three parts. The first part is an introduction to what MINOS does in terms of contest logging and some of the features it does, how to get the software and install it. Then I'm going to show you how to set it up and quickly enter a couple of contest QSOs and show some of the additional features. Then I'm going to move on to rig control and rotator control and how to set up and use rig control. And then finally, hopefully, there'll be some time for sort of questions and answers at the end.
Indeed, thank you. Thanks very much, Peter. Before your presentation, a reminder that if you're watching this on Monday, the 4th of September, then this is live and you can ask questions and make comments on either BATC or YouTube chat at any time during the presentation or straight afterwards. Please include your first name and call sign if you have one within every message. And note that you can make this video stream fill your screen on most devices, usually by double clicking on the picture or pressing the full screen button. But now, back to Peter to find out more about MINOS.
Right, here we go. At least, hopefully it will. Right, so MINOS, what is it and what does it do? The original MINOS program was released way back in 2005, having been developed from a previous program to that, written during the mid-1990s. So it's got quite a pedigree. And the Windows version is the one I'll be showing, although there are versions running even on Android. It's basically probably the most comprehensive and advanced contest logger, particularly for VHF contests, but will in fact now also work with many of the RSGB HF contests. It was originally conceived and written by Mike Goody, G0GJV, who's still sort of the team leader, but it's now got a development team of 9 people, including myself, and I have particular responsibility for the rig control and the way it interfaces with rigs and to some extent rotators. The demonstration I'll be running tonight is using Microsoft Windows, but there are builds for Linux and the Pi operating system, and there's a Mac operating system version currently being developed, which we hope will be available soon. So what it does is a logging program for RSGB contests. And I'll go into a bit of detail as to exactly why it does that and how it does it in a little while. And in particular, it does the scoring. And some of the rules for contesting get a bit complicated with additional bonus points for squares or postcodes, as well as the sort of points per kilometre. And the other important thing it does is duplicate checking. As most of you know, in a contest, if you work the same station twice in the same part of the contest, you certainly won't get any extra points, and in some cases you'll lose points. So duplicate checking is quite important. And then it also goes on to things like statistics. It gives you an idea of how many points you're scoring per hour, what you've done in the last 10 minutes, and also the best DX, which is one of the pieces of information that you normally need at the end of the contest. And then various extra things it does. Rig control is, to my mind, one of the cleverest. and you can use memories. And also it now has a feature where if you're using a transverter, for example, if it's a 2-meter contest and you've got an HF transceiver with a converter to go up to 2 meters, the rig control part of the software will actually cope with that transfer of frequency. Similarly, you can have rotator control with a number of presets, which you can set how you like. For example, you might have the compass bearings of northwest, west, southwest, etc. Both these control features are, should we say, complicated to set up initially. And so please, if you're going to implement them, read the user manual and some of the other documentation we've got available before you use it. I've done it so many times, it's fairly intuitive now. But when you meet it for the first time, it doesn't necessarily follow the way you think it might do. If you do it the right way, there's a very good chance it'll work first time. Other features it's got is chat. In a multi-station setup, you can send text messages between the different stations. Similarly, you can monitor the log of one of the other stations in the multi-station setup. It has keyer facilities to be able to send voice and CW messages. You can record them and then play them back. In particular, I used to think that was a bit of a gimmick, but in fact, it's remarkably useful. Some rigs, such as the ICOM 9700, the built-in memories for voice, particularly voice memories, you can only access them by using half the screen for the extra sort of software switches. Whereas if you're using MINOS to do it, you can leave the main radio screen as you want it and operate the memories from within MINOS. There's also a cluster. We can connect to a DX cluster, which you can view in a separate window and also give you control of rig frequency and indeed bearing if you've got the rotator connected, and also a KST client. And also it has an interface, if you want it, to a QRZ server, which I'll demonstrate later on. And then if you've got a multi-user, multi-contest, multi-PC setup, MINOS has fairly extensive networking capabilities. UDP, User Datagram Protocol, it allows data to be exchanged between the various programs. For example, if you've got a logging program running live during the contest, the MINOS QSO information can be fed directly into the station log. And similarly, if you're running a FT8 style contest, you might be having WSJTX or one of the other programs running, and you can feed data from that program into MINOS. And it's now got to the stage where it's so feature rich that the user manual now runs to 135 pages. So it's quite a reasonable sized document now. And perhaps best of all, it's free. And free meaning free, not please can we have a donation, not free as in, well, there's lots of adverts. It is really, truly free. So how do we get it and how do we set it up? The MINOS files are stored on the sourceforge.net website. And if you go to sourceforge.net/projects/MINOS/files, there are a number of files there. Normally, the latest version is the one at the top of the list. And if for some reason you want an older version, they're also stored there. So if you download the latest iteration of the file, which currently is 253.1, and download that, and that exe file now includes a documentation file. So just the one file downloads, and you can then install it as indeed any other normal Windows file. Go past the various warnings you get, depending on which version of the operating system. It might say, do you want to allow this program to change your computer? Go yes. Accept the normal user agreement. And you then come on to a few defaults. By default, the program will install in C/MINOS, but you can overwrite that and put it somewhere else if you want to. And similarly, the log files will install to C/MINOS/logs, but that can be changed. And a lot of people keep their logs in things like Dropbox or OneDrive so that you can get to the log files easily from another computer in the shack. So that's downloading and installing. Right, let's try this for real. If we do a quick bit of, and go to that one, and go to that one. Right, this is the startup splash screen, as it's called. And the first thing you will notice is that I'm not using the version of the file which I said was available. There is a new beta version just come out, just been released, which is very close to the next version that we hope to have available very soon, which is 2.5.4, I think it is. And so what I'm going to show you tonight might be slightly different from anyone you're used to for those who already run MINOS, but gives you an indication of what is likely to be available very soon. So there are a number of options on this front page. In particular, click here to read the manual. If this is the first time you've installed the program, I strongly recommend that you read or at least glance through the manual first to get an idea of what you have to do to make it all work. Also on this front page, there's no need to do anything else. There are facilities for protecting the log files by age mainly, so that if after, say, you set this to 3 days, it means after 3 days you can't by mistake go back and edit or delete the file. But say generally you don't need to do any of those on the front page, just click OK. And you're greeted by a blank screen. And the first thing to do is to set up a contest. So if we go into File, New VHF Contest, it opens up this page. And we now need to go into, because I'm going to do a VHF contest for demonstration, if we click on VHF calendar, if this is the first time you've run the program or you've not run it for a significant amount of time, we strongly suggest down the bottom of the screen here is download latest calendar. If you click on that, it will download from the RSGB contest site the latest calendar, you will get a message up saying there are a number of files and we will download most of them. If you then click OK, then you can be sure you've got the latest contests and the latest contest rules. So we now need to select a contest. And for the purposes of this discussion, let's enter the 2-meter UCAT contest, which is actually tomorrow. So click on it, then select contest. And it then brings up a new screen, and we need to fill in some of the contest information. The first thing is the entry. Well, I've got some selection answers already here. This is UCAC, so I will click on UCAC, and I can show you what is in there in edit. It's the call sign of the main operator, if it's on behalf of a club, name and address details. It's the basic entry information for the contest. Then it needs station details. This is 2 meters. And there again, what this does is the transmitter, receiver, and antenna information. So we can click OK there. And then the other vital piece of information for the contest is the QTH. In this case, I've already set up my home QTH, which is just straightforward address and height details. There's then, if it's a club contest, you can enter the name of a club, but for normal individual, you can leave that blank. And then as a reminder, it's come up with the contest name, the band, and the last thing we need to fill in this section, this part is the section. Usually there is low power, open and restricted sections. So we'll select restricted section here. It's now filled in the call sign as sent, the locator as sent. For the UCAC, we don't need postcode or QTH, and it's also brought in the power from my station details I entered earlier. And then it has down here the start date and time and end date and time of the contest. Now, in order to make this work for tonight, I'm going to edit the time for the contest. Otherwise, it won't let me enter any QSOs. So we'll pretend it started at 7 o'clock this evening. We'll leave radio name and antenna name out. And the rest of this is all fairly straightforward. It's telling me the scoring for this contest is per kilometer, and it also uses UCAC bonuses. So if we now go OK, it then gives us the option of filing the contest log name. And there again, by default, it starts off with the call sign, the date, and the band, and it will log it file it in the directory that we initially chose, which was MINOS logs in my case, and click save. And we now come up with the opening screen. And probably the best way is to put in a dummy QSO and show you how it works. So the main part is this part of the screen. And if we put in a call sign of a station we're going to work, we'll pretend we've heard G3ZPB calling CQ. So we go back to him, G3ZPB, and then there are these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes to complete for most contests. And we can either get to them with the mouse, or we can use function key. F2 will get you to there, function 3, F4, and F5, or tab will bring you across in the order which we are normally using. Because we're doing what's called search and pounce, so I'm answering other people's CQ calls, it goes from call sign, we're assuming they are going to report to us. So supposing that G1ABC sends me back 5 and 9, and his serial number is 002, and he sends me India Oscar 90 Delta Golf. And we then can press tab, which will go to comments, and then tab again and again will bring me into the report that I'm sending him, which is 5 and 9. And the serial number I've sent is automatically starts off at 001. As a reminder, it's here, but it's also in this big window here, 001, and it's reminding me of my call sign and my locator. So when all this information is correct for the QSO, the easiest way then is to press the enter key, and the QSO details go to this top part of the screen, which shows the date, the time, the band, the mode, the call sign I've worked, and the serial and reports out and in, and his locator, and it's also calculated the distance and indeed the bearing. Right, let's show that again, because this is one of the obviously more important features. Let's make it easy for me. We'll go G2 DFG. I don't know if there is a G2 DFG, but never mind. And he's sending me 5 and 8. He's been going hammer and tongs, and he's sending me 010, and he's in India Oscar. He's a bit further away. He's in 80 Alpha Delta, and I'm going to send him 5 and 9 002 from India Oscar 91 Whiskey Hotel, and all complete. We press the enter, and this has gone up to the top again. And this also shows another feature. The locator boxes are highlighted because I've worked 2 new squares. So down the bottom of the screen, it shows I've got bonuses, 2 bonuses, 2 bonus scores, 461 points. And so my total is 461 points. So that's logging a straightforward QSO. Now, supposing a little bit way later in the contest, I hear G1ABC calling, and it immediately flags up that this is a duplicate because I've already worked him. And down in the bottom here, it shows I sent 001 as a reminder that I can check back in my log. So normally there would be no point in continuing with this QSO. So we can either delete it by pressing on the mouse on the X or pressing escape, and it will then delete. However, if it really is, we want to do it again because the station the other end didn't log it or whatever, we can in fact log the QSO. We'll go 5 and 8, and he's sending me 5 and 8. This time he's sent me 025, and he is still in India Oscar 90 Delta Golf. And now if I press enter, it will say here, just a minute, this is in fact a duplicate. If we press enter again, it says this is a duplicate call sign, but I can force it to enter this in my log. So if we now go force, it will then go into my log, but it'll be highlighted in red because as far as we're concerned, it's a duplicate. So that covers duplicates. Then there's another clever trick we can do. If we've entered a previous contest, we can make a file from the log file containing the call sign information and locator information. And if, for example, we now work G3 Tango Bravo Kilo stroke portable, down here I've got details of a previous QSO, perhaps last month or last year, from this station. And this year I'm sending him 57004, and he's sending me 5 and 6. His serial number we'll pretend is 007, and we listen out for his locator, which is India Oscar 93 Romeo Alpha. Now I can either type those 6 digits in there, or I can press F12, as in match transfer. I press F12, it will copy the locator information into there, which is perhaps a more accurate way than trying to remember to type 6 digits correctly. But make sure during the contest that this station is indeed in that locator, because people move and you will look very silly if you copy the locator from the previous contest and put it in thinking that that is right, because you will lose points. So that's another QSO we can log. So that covers the sort of basic contesting. And there are a number of other features that the program has. If I pull this across so I can see it more easily, the clock is the default up there, but if I push this up a bit more, make a bit more space, and instead of the clock, I can, for example, have stats, and this will tell me, push this back up, the best DX and how we've been performing in the last 10 minutes and normally the last hour, but because I've only been entering this contest for 14 minutes, it's telling me the information over the last 14 minutes. So that's one of the things that we can put up there. And one of the other useful, or I find useful things, is instead of stats, is a locator map. And if we push that right up, and we've got a locator map, we are here in IO 91, and we've not yet worked a station in IO 91, so there's no background dark blue, but we have worked stations in these 3 other squares. So having that map, locator map there, is quite a useful thing to have during the contest. If somebody's calling from IO 81 square, you can immediately check, oh, we've not worked him yet. So if we worked him, we can get our 500 bonus points and things like that. So that's the basic sort of statistics. One of the other useful things it has is a QRZ server. And this is a little bit complicated to set up first thing, we need to go into Tools, Startup Apps Configuration. And in order to make new apps work, we first of all have to stop the current apps that are working. And then if I copy that to something new, which we could call Tonight, and click OK. This then brings up some variations of apps we can start. And I want a new entry. So if I go New Entry, and the app name is QRZ Server. And if we now go Save and Start Apps, this has started the QRZ server. I've already entered my details, so it's logged me in. We can now cancel that to get rid of that picture. And we can now go Start All Apps. OK. Right, we now need to show the QRZ details. So if I now go into Tools, Screen Layouts, Configure Screen Layouts, and let's clone that one and call that Tonight, and go OK. And instead of the auxiliary display, let's change that to QRZ Display. Apply, and OK. And we can now shut that down. Right, now up here, we've got a QRZ page. If I now, for the purposes of this discussion, for example, put in my call sign, and click on QRZ, for some reason this is disconnected. Okay, perhaps I'll come back to that later. For some reason the QRZ server seems to have gone down, maybe because I'm using most of the bandwidth for the video link. But what would happen is by pressing QRZ, it then brings up here the details from the QRZ server of the call sign, name, address, and his QRA locator. So, for example, if you didn't know the person, you could immediately go back to him or her with their name. So that's the QRZ server. So that is basically how MINOS works for a, let's go back from that for a moment, go back to Tools, Screen Layout, Configure Screen Layout, and Edit, and take that back to Auxiliary Display and the Locator Map, and Apply, and OK, and OK. Right, so that's basically got the contest logging more or less working, and I hope has sort of demonstrated the basic contest logging. Right, if we now go back to my PowerPoint and share. So we've done that for real, and we've come back. Right, now I want to move on to rig control. And as I've said earlier, read the manual, please, before doing this. Because it's slightly complicated for a first time, and it's likely to lead to much frustration and indeed lots of hours tearing your hair out why it won't work. And there's basically 5 steps to setting this up. But first of all, you need to decide how to connect the rig to the computer. If you can, a standard direct USB connection is the preferred option because it tends to be simpler and less prone to error. If not, then you will probably need a USB to RS232 converter, unless you're lucky enough or old enough to have a computer with an RS232 serial port and a rig with an RS2 serial port. But for the moment, we'll assume you're going to go the USB route. You need the correct drivers for your PC. Most manufacturers supply a specific USB driver, which you can download from the website. In my particular case this evening, I'm using an ICOM rig. And if you go to the ICOM website and follow the links for downloads and support, you can find the drivers and download those and install them. And I should also have said, do not plug in the rig, do not plug the USB cable into the computer until you have got the drivers installed in your rig and you've set up the correct settings for the rig, which is step 2. There are a number of settings in the rig to set up so that it will work correctly with rig control. For example, the baud rate, the speed. You might need to check the address and the settings for stop bits and things like that. And also ICOM rigs, for example, need a setting called CIV transceive switched off to operate reliably. Then step 3 is to ascertain the relevant COM port that your computer is going to use. And the device settings is the easiest way to find that. And there'll be a port number, and just make a note of that. Then the next step in MINOS is to add radio, and I'll show you where that is in just a moment. And then finally, select the correct rig in the contest window, and hopefully it will go. When you are selecting the add radio in MINOS, there are 2 programs that you can use. MINOS, in common with many other programs that have rig control, don't actually talk to the rig or the rotator at all. They use an interface program, of which there are 2. One is called HamLib and one is called OmniRig. HamLib is probably the preferred choice. It tends to be easier to set up. It normally reacts quicker and gives you control over more features on the rig. So preferably use HamLib, but OmniRig has 1 or 2 advantages. If you're having several programs on your computer that you want to talk to the rig with, then OmniRig allows port sharing. And also OmniRig has individual files which are easy to edit. If for some reason you need to change something, then the individual OmniRig files are perhaps a more appropriate way to go. So let's see what this actually works in operation. We'll go back to MINOS. Right. So what we need to do is to first of all go into Tools, Startup Apps Configuration. We're running the Tonight configuration. So if we edit, and we're going to add a new entry called rig control, and save and start apps. And this comes up with a new window called MINOS rig control, which is the logger for rig control. And the first thing you need to do is to set up radios. Now, I've already selected the IC 9700. If you're using the default CIV, you don't need anything there. You need the COM port that hopefully you would have made a note of earlier, and the speed that you have set the rig to. And then there are some additional features that you can load. The ICOM 9700, we can control the RIT, we can see the signal meter, we can control the volume, and we can also put the radio into transmit, should you want to, from MINOS. So we can now go OK, and we can go back to the main screen, cancel that because we've got our apps now working, click OK, and nothing yet works, which is where you start pulling your hair out and saying, it doesn't work. What we have to do is to select the radio in this main MINOS screen. So if we now go into here, rig control, and pull down 9700, lo and behold, we've now connected to our 9700, which I can assure you is reading 145.150. And if I turn the knob on the rig, you will see this frequency here will change. And also we can control the rig frequency from MINOS. I have preset 5 kilohertz steps. So if we click plus 162, 160, we'll go up to 167, 160, etc. And also here is the volume control. If I turn it up, you should probably hear the background noise from the rig. And also I can do it manually from the radio.
I think we probably can't hear that actually, Peter, just due to some sound processing filtering that goes on between us.
Okay.
I wasn't aware that you were going to play out some audio, but I'm sure we can take your word for it that works.
Yes. Okay. And so that's got the rig control working. And then there are 2 memory features. The rig is currently set to 144.172.16. If we go there and put set, it's picked up the frequency the rig is. We can click OK. And so now there's 1 memory set to that frequency. And if we would want to set the second memory, go to set. And for example, if we want to go use 144.850, for example, and click OK, we've now got the second memory set up there, and the rig has changed, and I can quickly now go between the 2 frequencies on the rig just by merely clicking, and the receiver's gone down to 172, 160 or 850, which of course is outside the USB part, the upper sideband part of the band. We won't worry about complications like that for the moment. Right, why should we do this? If we go down there a bit so we can have a new QSO, let's have a QSO now with, we'll say, G3 RTY, and we're going to send him 5 and 9, and we've had back from him 5 and 9. He's been going hammer and tongs all evening, so he's up to 35. But he's only just down the road. He's in IO 91 Delta Foxtrot. And we've got all the details there. Click enter. And so he's come up in the log here. And if we now scan across, we've now got his frequency in the log. So that makes log keeping much easier. If we're trawling the band later on in the contest and we come back and we hear a station later on in the contest calling, or in QSO, on 172, 160, there's a very good chance that it's that station. So that's a helpful feature. And similarly, if we had rotator control, that last station, his bearing was 266, which automatically got transferred into the target. And if we had a rotator connected and pressed turn, then we would automatically turn the rotator into his direction. And that can save a lot of time in a contest when you're not sure where another station is. Having the ability to quickly turn the rotator, turn the beam into the correct correct direction can save a lot of head scratching and wondering why you can't receive the other station. So that covers rotator control and rig control, which I think covers the main features of MINOS. So we'll quickly go back to there and come back to that and share. And so we've now done the rig control for real. And just as a reminder, the files are at sorgeforge.net, projects MINOS files. And then also we have a big user group on minosgroups.io, where there are a number of files, which includes, for example, settings for many of the more popular rigs. So you can get to it much quicker. And anybody who wants to come back to me, there's my email address. Right, back to you, David.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Peter. Lots to cover there. You've covered wonderful, and you're very brave doing a live demo. I sometimes worry about that. So well done for that. You deserve a drink as well now. Well, anyway, if you've got any questions or comments that you want to ask Peter, this is the time to do it. If you haven't already done so, you can either do it on YouTube chat or BATC messaging. And please don't forget to include your first name and your call sign if you have one as well. I'm going to read out a couple of questions that we've got, Peter, and I've got a couple myself as well. But there's one I just want to ask now because I'm not quite sure what it is, and maybe the person can come back to me. This is a question from Ronnie Ratcliffe, which was a question how to program a PNL radio, Papa November Lima radio, and I'm not really sure what that is, and my colleagues working behind the scenes here at the RSGB, they're not sure either. So if you, Ronnie, if you can come back to us and explain what that means or what that stands for, then I'll be happy to pass that question on to Peter. I mean, this is obviously a passion for you, because at the beginning, and I didn't know that when we did the rehearsal a few weeks ago, that you're very much involved yourself with the development of this. You're one of, I think you said, a team of 9. So how long have you been involved with it?
I've been involved myself for best part of 5 years. Minos or Mike and the team decided the way to go was to put in rig control and rotator control, and unfortunately there's a bit of an opening Pandora's box to all sorts of problems. And in the early stages, we had to do a lot of testing with a lot of rigs to get the get the format right, so that we didn't actually have to test every single rig. And we tested about a dozen different rigs. I had access to a number of rigs myself, and we also enlisted the help of one of the amateur radio retailers near to London, and we spent a happy best part of a day using some of his rigs and actually testing the rig control interface. So yes, my particular side of the development is to make sure that the rig control system works. And we've now got it to the stage where I can more or less guarantee that if you follow the rules and follow the documentation that we've said, this is how you do it, there's a very good chance it'll work first time. And the majority of support questions we get, either people are not using the latest version, which has all the latest software upgrades, or they have not followed the documentation and they've left out one of the steps. And if you leave out one of the steps, it will not work.
No, well, I'm sure people can understand that. I can say that from my own experience and people in my own club who use various other bits of logging software, it's one of the most complex things to set up, and they normally need a bit of help. If people do try and set this up, I will come to some of your questions in a moment. But just while we're talking about support and questions, do you have a support website or a forum or something like where people can ask?
Yes, the MINOS groups forum is the usual one.
So that's Groups.io, isn't it? I think.
Yes, Groups.io. Right. Yes, okay. And that's the one that most people use. And through that you can ask questions, and one of us will normally come back, usually within a couple of hours, but certainly within 24 hours, either to point you in the right direction, or there is a way of setting the trace logs in MINOS, which actually gives us details of actually what's going on, and you can email those trace files to us, and then either David or myself can usually work out what it is, and as a last resort, one of us will link into you using Teams or something. Right. And can sort it out.
Wow, what support! Wonderful.
We've got support down to a fairly fine art now.
Good, jolly good. Okay. Well, so we'll get on some of your questions at home, but if you have got a question or comment or anything to make, then please ask those questions now. The first one, I think the real question that I can see was from, I'm not sure of the actual name, but Keith's Teeth. So I guess, Keith, can I have K18TH as my QRZ? That's a question. And he also, by the way, comments and says, an awesome bit of software. Thanks, Peter, for showing us that.
Right, what was that one?
Well, the question was, can I have K18TH as my QRZ? That's the specific question. And he's complimenting you on the
as your QRZ.
Yeah, I'm not absolutely sure what he means, but I hope that you might know.
I presume that's the login details for the QRZ. Yes.
Possibly.
When you set up the QRZ server, you need to put in your username and password, and then it logs in and will then work as normal. So yes, you can use whatever username and password you want, which I presume is the answer to that question.
Okay, fine, thank you. Again, I couldn't find a name for this, but question from Wigglepig, that's the name on YouTube. Does MINOS support /M use, so mobile use, I guess that is?
Yes, it does. Yes, I think I know who Wigglepig is, and yes, it will. Yes, you can have suffixes, particularly lots of stations operate /P, but yes, you can also operate /M.
Okay, thank you very much. John, G4IRN, says, is there a band map function, and also is there a super check partial function?
Right. The answer to both questions is yes. Yes, there is a band map feature. I didn't demonstrate it, but yes, there is. You can set it up for almost whatever size of the amount of the screen you want to use, and it will take in information from an external source or from your logging itself, and you can go back to a particular, if you've heard someone calling CQ, for example, or no, if you've heard someone in an existing QSO, you can log it on the band map, and then go back to it at a later date, and it will automatically set the rig to that frequency. And the partial logging or partial check, yes, I didn't actually show that, but yes, it will do complete partial. So you start off with, for example, G or M, and then as you put a number in, it gradually goes down, and then the first letter, and so it gradually goes down to the exact call sign. So yes, it will do super partial.
Lovely. All right. Thank you very much. That's good an update. It's nice to see so many people watching who are unlicensed yet, but clearly keen to get in there and get into contesting as well. So they're watching. In fact, Ronnie Ratcliffe comes back and says that he's not licensed yet, but he uses PMR 446. So that may be the question he was asking. So could you control at the moment, anyway, for him until he's licensed? Can you control any other rigs like PMRs? Do you know?
I think the answer is no, because the hamlib and omnirib libraries that we use are designed specifically for amateur stations, amateur rigs. However, omnirig, if you know what you're doing, could be modified to operate with just about any rig. And so if you're using a, shall we say, non-standard rig, providing you have access to the computer controls on it and know what software commands to send, either you or find a colleague to write an omnirig INF file, as they're called, and you could then operate more or less any rig.
Okay, well, that's good. And good luck with your exams, your foundations, when you go for them, by the way. Simon GM0SCA says, how does one set up rig control, and any preference on make or model of rotator?
Right, the rotator control is set up exactly the same as I did rig control. You go into startup applications, and the apps, instead of rig control, you need to select rotator control, and then exactly the same process. You need to set up the baud rate, the COM port, and the type of rotator. There are some rotators that are easier to control than others. There are a very small number of rotators come with built-in computer control, not many. And what a lot of people do is they add an interface card, and then you can control almost any rotator. And I'm not sure whether we're allowed to advertise here or not. There is a company that trade under the name ERC, that's Echo Romeo Charlie, and they make a fairly universal relay board, and the instructions come with a relay card for interfacing into probably a couple of dozen different models of rotator. And the Yaesu and high gain stroke CDR, CDE are Kenpro. Most of those models are readily convertible with an ERC card put in, and you then control the card from a USB or RS-232 port from your computer, and the control card has an extra relay board, and you just connect the relay contacts in parallel with the switches, front panel switches of the rotator, and you can control almost any rotator. One or two complications, the feedback pot. If the feedback pot, one end of it is grounded, it makes the interfacing much easier. I tried to interface, I think it was an early Ken Pro rotator last year, and in that particular circuit, the control pot is floating, and it was a very difficult job to keep RF out.
I'm sure. Okay, well, so it sounds like it's all possible. This is one of the wonderful things, I guess, that you could talking to the actual developers when doing some of these things, and I'm sure that forum on the Groups IO will help as well. Someone has, I think this is more or less a request that maybe you could do this live, possibly. This is from David G4ASR, asking to demonstrate how to switch the IC9700 using the log rather than switching the actual radio for multi-band SHF context.
Oh, yes,
So
yes.
is that possible?
Yeah.
And if
Yes.
it is, could you show us?
Yes. What we say about doing a live. Yes,
Okay.
just a moment.
We'll give you a chance, that's of course.
Yes. Right. I will try and do this. If we go into MINOS.
While you're doing that, Peter, I'll just remind everybody at home that you know, to put those questions. Maybe if there's other software that you've used and never considered using MINOS, is this going to, you know, you're going to download this and give it a try? So
right, I'm ready to roll.
Right, here we go. Yeah, we've got your screen up now.
Right. If so at the moment we're running 2 meters. If we go into File, New VHF Contest, VHF Calendar, and pick a 70 SEMS contest and select, and there again we'll set the date to 03. Entry is 432. The station is 70 SEMS. The QTH is home, and the section is AR, and we go OK, and we save the log. If I've done this properly, which for some reason, just a moment. Let's go back. If we go back into rig control, the RIT is playing up. Yes, right. So on 2 meters, I have the 2 meter frequency, which is 144.150, and I've got both contests operational. In particular, of course, you might well do this for things like field day, the VHF field day. That's how I know this works, because our station did it. We had 23 SEMS and 70 SEMS running at the same time. So with the 2 meter log open, the rig has set itself to 2 meters. And if I turn the frequency, This will change to the 2 meter frequency. If I then click on the 70 SEMS contest, the rig has changed to 70 SEMS and is now reading 432.100. And just to prove it, if I change the frequency, it'll go up, we'll say 115 just to prove it. There we go. It's on 432.115. So I've got complete control of the rig from MINOS across 2 bands.
Good. Okay. Well, I hope that's answered your question, David, and or your challenge almost for Peter to do that. That's excellent. Thank you very much for doing that, Peter.
Okay.
I mean, looking at this software and what it can do, it's obviously hundreds and maybe even thousands of hours have been spent on it. Do you know how much time has been spent on it since the original was produced?
No. But yes, as you say, it's yes, it must be into the thousands of hours of development now. Obviously, none of the development team do it full time. It's a hobby for all of us. But having said that, certainly when a major new version was coming out, like MINOS 2, which had rig control, several of us spent quite a lot of our day and evening testing it and debugging it and leaving people like Mike to rewrite the software and then testing it again and saying, no, this doesn't work, try again. And yes, it was many, many hours in total.
Yeah, and it does seem very nicely integrated with a lot of the RSGB contests. They're almost set up for you. So, I mean, is that a good reason for considering MINOS against maybe one of the other general purpose contest programs?
Yes. Mike Goody, the original writer and still the sort of lead, is closely involved with the RSGB contest committee. And the fact that the MINOS program will download the contest calendar from the RSGB website does, as far as I know, set it apart from any other program that I've certainly come across in terms of how well integrated it is to the RSGB contests. There are 1 or 2 other logging programs, but I'm not aware that either of them integrate quite as well and is effectively with just about every RSGB, certainly VHF contest, and the number of HF contests is now growing that it will interface with.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you very much for all you've been done here. If when people start using it, if they've got ideas for new features and things like that, again, is the Groups.io the best place to sort of go and put those ideas?
Yes, it is. Yes, certainly. Yes, we always welcome new features and new ideas, and I think that's partly where some of the existing features have come from. I don't expect any user to use them all, but they've all either been generated by users requesting them or things that the development team have thought would be useful.
Yeah.
So yes, please, if you've got ideas for what you'd like it to include, please put a message up on the Groups.io site.
Well, I think you've covered all the questions that we've been asked, and I really thank you very much for all that tonight. Lots of compliments from people as well, saying, I mean, one particular I've picked out, Paul Green says, contest logging has been a bit of a mystery to me until now, so thanks, Peter, for an excellent demo. And he also mentions that he's going in for his foundation exam on Saturday, so good luck with that, Paul.
Oh, good luck on Saturday, yes.
So, Peter, thanks very much indeed for spending the time tonight, and as I said, being brave enough to do a live demo of this software. We'll put the details of where you can find the software to download, the proper place to download it, shortly after this webinar. We'll put it on the RSGB website, and of course your contact email address as well, which you're happy to share with people. But once again, many, many thanks to you, Peter.
Okay, thank you, and good night, everybody.
Thank you. And that does conclude this webinar. Thanks once again to our guest, speaker Peter Burton, G3ZPB, and also to the team who helped put this series together behind the scenes. We hope you've enjoyed this Tonight at 8 and that you'll be able to join us next time when Lee Volanti, G0MTN, will be here to give us an introduction to contesting. It's a perfect complement to tonight. Now, if you'd like to see details of future webinars or watch recordings of previous programmes in the series, please visit rsgb.org/webinars, where you can also send us comments and feedback. And if you subscribe to the RSGB's YouTube channel, you'll be notified of all upcoming Tonight at 8 webinars, as well as other new videos and presentations from the Society on a wide range of amateur radio topics. And finally, if I may, a reminder about the RSGB convention, which is happening in Milton Keynes from the 13th to the 15th of October. You'll find expert presentations, discussion forums, special interest groups and RSGB committees to talk to, and there's also a great social side to it too. The draft programme will be in the October edition of Radcom and also on the RSGB website soon. And the deadline for the early bird discount has just been extended to the September the 14th. So just got time to book there. Find out more, book or watch the 2-minute taster video at rsgb.org/convention. Until next time, this is David G7URP signing off and clear. Bye bye.